Well, hello, welcome again to this introduction to New Testament Greek. This is up to chapter 4 or section 4. As I mentioned before, this is a fairly straightforward and fairly basic introduction to New Testament Greek, and you're probably wise to get a grammar to go with this as well, but I'm just going to take you through the basics. So in this chapter we're going to start looking at nouns, but I like to begin with a little bit of reading practice, just to practice again our alphabet, so we get very used to the letters and being able to read the letters with some fluency. So a little reading here, and this is from John's Gospel in chapter 1. So egeneto anthropos apestalmenos, so just do it in syllables, apestalmenos, para theou, onoma auto, Ioannes, again do it in syllables, Ioannes, this is the name for John. It's the Greek attempt to put a Hebrew name into Greek. So it becomes Ioannes, John. Hutos, don't forget the breathing here there at the beginning. Hutos aelthen, eis, marturian, hina, marturese, peri, tu, photos. Hina, pantes, pistusosin, di autou. You'll notice this little mark, it's just like our inverted comma. There's an alpha which is elided here before a vowel, so instead of saying dia autou, Greek elides the alpha and just says di autou. So it means then there was a man, apestalmenos, having been sent from God, the name for him John. So his name was John. Hutos, that man, aelthen, came as a witness, in order that he might bear witness. But notice here, he might bear witness, 4 words in English, 1 in Greek, regarding the light, in order that pantes, all, might believe through him. So that's just, you might like to practice reading through and make sure you get used to the various diphthongs and breathings. Now we're going to move on. We've looked at verbs in omega and epsilon omega, and now we're going to look at nouns of the so-called second declension, ending in os. So what Greek does, as with Latin, it divides nouns up into certain groups. These groups are called declensions. There are 3 declensions in Greek, although the third declension, which we won't get to for a while, is a bit of a mixture of lots of bits and pieces, but it is a third declension. We're looking at the second declension, which is one of the most common, this is the most common declension of nouns, although there are plenty in the first and third as well. So nouns in Greek belong to different classes called declensions. Many, but not all, unfortunately, nouns ending in os belong to what is called the second declension, and are mostly, but not all, masculine in gender. So a Greek noun belongs to a declension, but it will have a gender, masculine, feminine, or neuter. It will have a number, singular or plural, and it will also have a case, which I'll be looking at in a second. So by the way, note that grammatical gender often has nothing to do with our usual understanding of the word gender. So you can have lithos, a stone, which is masculine, but you can have a word like arche, meaning beginning, which is feminine. It's got nothing really to do with our usual sense of gender, except that, of course, the word for a man will be masculine, the word for a woman, gune, will be feminine. In a Greek sentence, the subject of the verb is distinguished from the object of the verb using endings. Now we don't do that in English. In English we use word order to say what's the subject and what's the object. So for example, in the sentence, the man throws the ball, the subject is the man, and then you say the verb is throws, which you should know by now, that's ballet, and the object, so the man throws what? The man throws the ball, so that's the object of the sentence, is the ball. Greek does this with word order. If I put the ball throws the man, you'd say, well, that doesn't make any sense. You have to put it in this order. In Greek, you can change the order of the words, but it doesn't necessarily change the meaning because the endings tell you what's doing what. So we say that the subject of a sentence, we say, is in the nominative case. It's a nominative case used for the subject, and the object is in the accusative case. So the accusative case is used for the object of the verb. Now in Greek, endings are used to represent the different cases, whereas in English this is done, as I mentioned, using word order. Now we're just going to do two of the cases in this section, and we'll look at other cases in the next section. So when you learn a Greek noun, you learn it in the nominative case. So for example, the word for, or one of the words for man, in fact it's more general, anthropos can mean a human being, it can just refer to a person, but you generally learn anthropos as a man, cognate with words like anthropology and so on. So anthropos, a man. Now here are the endings. So you learn anthropos, that's the nominative singular. If you want to make it the object of the verb, you change the os to on, so anthropon becomes the subject. In the plural, anthropoi, so anthropos becomes anthropoi, that means men, plural, and if you want men as the object of the verb, in the accusative case, that becomes anthropous. So you need to learn very carefully these very, very common endings. Now, Greek has, unlike Latin, Greek has a word for our word the definite article. Interestingly, many ancient languages, well, some do, some don't have a word for thee. Sanskrit, for example, doesn't have a word for thee, neither does Latin. The word for thee in Greek actually, it does make life a lot easier. It's good that it's there. So it's called the definite article, and it has to agree with the noun to which it is attached in number, that is singular or plural, gender, that is masculine, feminine or neuter, and case. So the words for thee corresponding to the above gender and cases that we did for anthropos are ho, notice the breathing, so you'd say ho anthropos, the man. If you had anthropon, accusative, you'd need ton anthropon. Hoi, anthropoi, the men, and then in the accusative, tous. So these are easy because we saw that on was the accusative ending of anthropos, anthropon, and anthropous. So these are not hard to learn because they're very similar to what we saw for the noun. So here's examples of this. Ho anthropos eke adelphon. The man has, from echo, a brother. The man has a brother. There's no a in Greek, you have to put it in English. There's no what we call indefinite article. You often have to supply that. Greek could have written this as adelphon eke ho anthropos. You could mix the order of these words up to some extent and you still have the same meaning. Here's another example. Hoi leproi balusin tous lithus. The lepers throw, now of course this is plural, we need the they form. The lepers throw the stones. Now I'm going to hit you with a lot of vocabulary. Again, you have to learn these. These are very common words in the New Testament, so you need to learn these carefully. Israel, Israel, this doesn't decline. In other words, it doesn't have any endings on it. It's always, whether it's accusative, no matter what case it's in, it's just always Israel, and the case will be determined from the context. Iudaios, again, watch pronunciation. Iudaios is a word for the Jew. It's often used not so much in a racial sense in the New Testament, but in the sense of hoi iudaioi, the plural, especially in John's Gospel. It refers to the Jewish leaders generally. So it's not meant to be seen as a pejorative term, simply, or even necessarily an ethnic term, but that often refers to the Jewish leaders. Pharisaios, you can see that word. These are all Hebrew names that have been put into Greek. So Pharisaios is just the Pharisee. Christos is often rendered as Christ. It's formed from a verb kreo, which means to anoint. So Christos literally is the anointed one, the one who has been anointed. And it's a Greek attempt to translate a Hebrew word Messiah, meaning the Messiah. So you can translate Christos in various ways. You can just say the Christ, but it does literally mean the Messiah or the anointed one. Angelos, notice the double gamma, so the first one's pronounced like an N, angelos, which becomes our word angel or messenger. Originally an angelos was a messenger, and then a divine messenger becomes an angel. Context tells you which it is, generally. Agros, we get our word agronomy, agrophobia, and so on. Agros is the word for a field, agros. Adelphos, word for brother. Anthropos, we've had man. Apostolos, an apostle, literally one who has been sent. The verb apostello is I send, and apostolos is one who has been sent, hence an apostle. Diakonos is with our word deacon, generally best to translate it as servant. In some of the later New Testament writings where some structure had been set up, you might be tempted to translate it as deacon, but probably best to take it as servant. There's a verb diakoneo, to serve. This is just a corresponding noun. Didaskalos, a teacher. Again, most of these are formed from verbs, so didasko is I teach, and a didaskalos is a teacher. Echthros, quite a harsh word, and it means one's enemy. Echthros. Thanatos, the word for death. Thronos is an easy one. Thronos, a throne. Cosmos, the world. Now, this comes from the verb cosmia, which means to arrange. So this is the world, but the sense of the ordered world. It's actually cognate with our word cosmetic. So it means to put things in order. There's the sense of it. So the cosmos is the ordered world. Kurios is the word for lord or master. It survives into modern Greek. It's Kyrios in modern Greek, meaning Mr. So kurios is the word for lord or master. Laos, like our word laity, laos is the word for people, and lepros for a leper. So you should perhaps pause and copy those words out, because you should learn those very carefully. There's a few more. Lithos, a word for stone. You get words like lithograph and so on. Logos, a word with a lot of meanings, but we generally just learn that as word at this stage. But it can have lots of other interpretations, in both classical and biblical Greek. So logos, a word. It can mean an argument, for example, line of thought. Nomos, a law or custom. Nomos, a law or custom. Ophthalmos, word for eye. You can see if you deaspirate these, you get opt, and we get words like optometry and so on. Ophthalmos is the word for eye. Paralytikos, a paralytic, it's an easy one. Potamos, a river. So a hippopotamus is a river horse. Hippos is the word for horse. A potamus, a river. Presbyteros, an elder. Get our word presbyter and so on from that. Topos, a place. Words like topography. Topos, a place. Philos, a friend. It can also be an adjective meaning dear, but we'll just learn it as philos, a friend, as a noun. And phobos, fear. Yeah, all those words with phobia and so on connected with that. Phobos, fear. Now here are some exercises. Again, you might take a screenshot or something, but I'll just go through and translate these so that you've got a translation, and then you should go back and make sure you can do it yourself. Angelos kale anthropon. An angel calls a man. Ho adelphos agron eke. The brother, go for the verb, has a field. The word order is fairly fluid in Greek. So the brother has a field. Hoi apostoloi graphusin logus. The apostles write logus, words. Now notice here, this is in the accusative because it's the object of the verb. This is in the accusative, it's the object of the verb. This is in the accusative, it's object of the verb. And these are in the nominative. Hode Christos krine tus anthropus kai tus angelus. So but, there's that de. Now de, by the way, always comes as second word in the sentence. So you can't say de ho Christos, you've got to put the de second after the ho. It breaks up the article and the noun. So it's but the Christ, krine judges, and now the object of that will be in the accusative, judges the men and the angels, or perhaps the messengers. U tsetusin ton diakonon. So now there's no person here, so it's just they, and we've got a negative. So they do not seek, from satio, the servant, or the deacon perhaps. They do not seek the servant. Apostolos therapeuae paralutikon. Notice it's a question. So that's the subject, that's the object. So does the apostle heal, from therapeuo, paralutikon, the paralyzed man? Gynoskomen de thanaton. But we know death, from gynosko. This is the first person plural here, so but we know death. Another question here, heuriskete topon. This is second person plural. Do you, plural, find topon a place? Theoro potamon. I see, or I am looking at, potamon, a river. Jesus sodze ton cosmon kai therapeuae ton adelphon. So we get two clauses here. Jesus saves, from sozo, ton cosmon, the world, and therapeuae, he heals the brother. Now remember, I introduced participles before, so I've got krinon, tus, anthropus, hot pharisaios, mise ton cosmon. So judging, participle, so it's judging, tus anthropus, the men. So it's accusative because it's the object of the participle. Judging the men, the Pharisee, singular, hates ton cosmon, the Lord. U philon theon holaos ublepetus angelus. Another participle here, not loving, and we've got a participle here, not loving God. The people, now people in English is plural, but in Greek it's singular, so this is a bit tricky here. Also, I'm being naughty using u here. To negate participles, you normally use a may, so I might just introduce that here and correct that. So you wouldn't normally say that in biblical Greek, you might in classical Greek. So this is this negative may, and it's used when you, in New Testament Greek, when you're negating participles, you use a may here. I've probably been a bit slack with that because I haven't introduced it yet, but may as well here. So not loving God, laos, the people, do not see. Now it's singular noun, so we need a singular verb, but in English it's plural. So not loving God, the people do not see the angels. Mison ton Christon phile thanaton. So hating, participle again, hating the Messiah, he loves death. You see how the participle is used as a separate clause. This is very typical of Greek. Hoi de presbyteroi seitusin ton Christon. But the elders seek the Christ, the Messiah. Ha diakonos heuriscon ton kurion eke philon. The servant finding, that's a participle here, the servant finding the Lord has a friend. Eulogon ton theon hot didaskalos metanoe. Again, participle here from eulogio. So blessing God, we don't say the God, but Greek will put the in there. Blessing God, or the God if you like. The teacher, metanoe, repents. Israel eke phobon kaitsete ton nomon. Israel has fear and seeks the law. Hoi iudaioi u philusin ton Christon. So it's the Jews, but here really the Jewish leaders do not love the Christ. Hoi anthropoi ekusin ekthrus alla hokurios philus. The men have enemies. Now here's this alla, meaning but, very strong but the Lord. Now Greek will often have a verb in one clause and you have to understand it in the next one. So it's the men have enemies, but the Lord, you have to understand eke from the verb here, has friends. We do this in English sometimes. You could in English say the men have enemies, but the Lord friends. Greek will often do this where you have to supply a verb from the previous clause. Theorumen potamus kai agrus. We are looking at rivers and fields. So I would suggest you might like to go back and write these out and go through and practice translating these again yourself. And that is the end of section 4.